The billionaire's guests, humiliated. A simple woman, but they had no idea who she really was. A night meant for love, twisted into something far crueler. Whispers, side eyes, a slow condescending smirk, a scoff, then a chuckle, then more, mockery spreading like wildfire, humiliation. A toast to the evening's most unexpected amusement. The ballroom erupted in laughter. Crash. A glass shattered. Silence. And at the center of it all, him, her billionaire husband, staring in disbelief. Unacceptable. Unforgivable. At their own wedding anniversary, in their own home, his beloved wife. And what he did next was unthinkable. Her heart was beating faster, not from nervousness, but from excitement. Since she was a little girl, she had dreamed of moments like this, not for the luxury, but for the meaning, the love, the celebration, the chance to stand beside the man who had seen something in her that nobody else did. Down below, the world was shining, crystals gleamed, heels echoed against marble, aristocratic voices exchanged refined greetings. It was a universe of excess. Simplicity had always been her greatest treasure. She didn't need expensive dresses, sparkling jewels, or looks of approval, because her essence had never been for sale. She was powerful, a billionaire, but her worth wasn't in jewels or luxurious dresses, but in her essence. In kindness, in quiet strength, in the simplicity that made her unique. But tonight she would discover that, for many, this was the only thing that mattered. She took a deep breath, her hands sliding over the soft fabric of her dress. Simple, yet flawless. This wasn't just an event. It was a night she had waited for so long. And now, she was about to descend those stairs. Sophia descended the grand staircase, her simple red dress a stark contrast to the sea of designer gowns glittering below. Her auburn hair, pinned in a modest updo, caught the light from the crystal chandeliers. Chandeliers she had personally selected when they renovated the mansion last spring. As her sensible heels touched the marble floor, the first whispers began. "Who let the help mingle with the guests?" a woman in diamonds muttered, loud enough for Sophia to hear. Sophia smiled politely and reached for a flute of champagne from a passing waiter. The young man gave her a subtle nod of recognition, but said nothing. "Excuse me, dear," a voice dripping with false sweetness called out. Vivian Wellington, wife of the city's largest property developer, approached with her companion Elaine. Both women were draped in designer gowns worth more than most people's cars. "I believe the catering staff entrance is through the kitchen," Vivian said, her perfectly lined lips curling into a smirk. "Though I must say, red is a bold choice for the help." Sophia took a measured sip of her champagne. "I'm a guest, actually." Elaine let out an exaggerated laugh. "Oh, honey, this is Richard Blake's anniversary celebration. The guest list is exclusive." Her eyes raked over Sophia's dress. "I'm sure whoever brought you meant well, but perhaps there's been a misunderstanding." Around them, conversations quieted as eyes turned their way. Sophia felt the heat rising to her cheeks, but kept her shoulders straight. She twisted her wedding band discreetly, a habit that had always centered her. "No misunderstanding," Sophia replied softly. "I was invited." "By whom, the gardener?" Vivian snickered, touching Elaine's arm as they shared the joke. An older gentleman nearby cleared his throat disapprovingly, but said nothing. "Tell us, what exactly do you do?" Vivian pressed, her voice carrying across the now hushed section of the ballroom. "I work in corporate restructuring," Sophia answered, meeting the woman's gaze directly. "Oh, like a secretary?" Elaine asked with feigned interest. "Executive level," Sophia clarified. Vivian's smile turned predatory. "I'm sure you are very executive." She winked at a cluster of onlookers who had gathered. "Tell me, do you own anything that didn't come from a department store?" Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but Vivian continued. "Because Richard's wife, whom you clearly haven't met, has exquisite taste. This event alone cost more than most people make in a year." The circle around them had widened. Some guests looked uncomfortable, others amused. "Actually, Sophia began. "Oh, wait," Elaine interrupted, touching Vivian's arm in mock excitement. "Maybe she's Richard's mistress. That would explain everything." The suggestion hung in the air for one terrible moment. Then Vivian raised her glass. "A toast to the evening's most unexpected amusement." The ballroom erupted in laughter, some genuine, some merely following Vivian's lead. The sound crashed over Sophia like a wave, faces blurring around her as the humiliation burned through her composure. In that moment, their special night, the anniversary celebration she had planned for months, the evening meant to honor 5 years of love and partnership, had twisted into something ugly and cruel. All those nights she'd lain awake thinking about every detail, every flower arrangement, every personal touch, reduced to this mockery. The weight of it pressed against her chest, stealing her breath. Their sacred celebration tarnished before her eyes. And then, crash. A glass shattered against marble. The laughter died instantly. Standing at the entrance to the ballroom was Richard Blake himself, his face a mask of cold fury. His tall figure commanded attention, his presence electric. The crowd parted instinctively as his eyes locked on the scene before him. But what happened next would change everything. A heavy silence swallowed the ballroom. At the grand entrance, the imposing figure of Richard Blake stood motionless. His black tuxedo was immaculate, perfectly tailored, his polished shoes gleaming under the chandelier's glow. But it wasn't his attire that sent shivers down the spines of those present. It was his expression. A cold, unwavering fury burned in his dark eyes as they locked onto the source of the commotion. He took a slow step forward. No one dared to speak. Even the clinking of champagne glasses had ceased, as if the very air had thickened with anticipation. Instinctively, guests parted, creating a silent path for him. Vivian swallowed hard, straightening her shoulders. "Mr. Blake, what a surprise!" she exclaimed, masking her unease with a strained smile. "We weren't expecting to see you so." She barely finished when, crack! The sharp sound of shattering glass made her flinch. The delicate remains of a broken champagne flute lay scattered across the marble floor. A trembling waiter instinctively bent down to clean it. "Leave it." 2 words, low, commanding. The waiter froze mid-motion. Vivian and Elaine stiffened. The power in his voice was undeniable. Richard's gaze swept across the room, taking in the hushed crowd. Then, with calculated patience, his eyes landed on Sophia, her flushed cheeks, her trembling fingers clutching the edge of her dress, the crushing weight of humiliation hanging over her. A muscle in his jaw tightened. "Who," he said, his voice slicing through the silence like a blade, "insulted this woman?" A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Vivian let out a nervous laugh, her fingers fidgeting with the diamond clasp of her purse. "Oh, it's nothing," she said quickly. "Just a misunderstanding. Richard tilted his head slightly. "A misunderstanding?" His tone was calm, but the air in the room shifted dangerously. Elaine cleared her throat. "It's just that, well, she doesn't exactly belong here, Mr. Blake. This is an elite event, and we assumed—" He exhaled sharply as if their words were amusing. Then, with slow, deliberate steps, he turned to Sophia. Elaine let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, come on, Richard, you're acting like she's someone important." A beat of silence followed. Richard didn't move, didn't blink. The weight of his gaze alone was suffocating. Then he exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath, as if absorbing the sheer audacity of the words spoken before him. His lips curved, not in amusement, but in something far more unsettling. A smile devoid of warmth. A razor-sharp warning wrapped in quiet restraint. He took a step closer. "Nobody?" His voice was a whisper, yet it carried the force of a thunderclap. "Is that what you think?" Elaine's smile faltered. The blood drained from her face. Richard's eyes flicked toward Sophia, then back to the stunned crowd. "Then let me enlighten you." And with those words, the air in the room became electric, crackling with the promise of a revelation that none of them would ever forget. "This woman is my wife." The ballroom froze. Vivian stumbled back a step, her mouth opening, yet no sound came out. Elaine let out a strangled gasp, clutching her chest as if she needed something solid to hold on to. Then the murmurs began, low, frantic, spreading like a spark igniting a wildfire. Eyes widened, champagne flutes trembled in unsteady hands, and the very air grew thick, suffocating. A guest whispered, "My God!" Another swallowed hard. Vivian tried to speak, but her voice failed miserably. Her frantic gaze darted between Richard and Sophia, searching, praying for any sign that this was some cruel joke. But Richard's unwavering stare left no room for doubt. Humiliation seeped into their faces like a bitter poison. And now, the crowd no longer looked at them with admiration, but with the same disdain they had so eagerly poured onto Sophia moments before. Then came the final blow. Richard lifted his free hand, just a simple, effortless gesture, and not a single soul dared to utter another word. The entire ballroom plunged into a deafening silence as Richard raised his hand. "Kill the music! Cut the lights!" The command was obeyed instantly. The room was swallowed by darkness, broken only by the cold glow of the chandeliers above. The hushed murmurs of the guests were the only sound left, a cruel contrast to the extravagant celebration that had unfolded just moments before. Richard strode to the head table and reached for a rare bottle of champagne, worth $10,000. Without hesitation, he tipped the bottle, letting the golden liquid spill onto the marble floor, every drop falling in agonizing slow motion. The sound of the champagne hitting the ground echoed through the silent hall like a death sentence. His piercing gaze locked onto Vivian and Elaine, both frozen in place, their faces drained of all color. "This," he said, his voice quiet yet lethal, "is the worth of your words. Nothing." Then, without sparing them another glance, he turned to his security team and gave a simple, chilling order. "Make them disappear." No explanations, no need for details. Everyone understood. The women barely had time to react before they were surrounded. Their lips parted in protest, but no one stepped in to help. The weight of Richard's authority and their own disgrace crushed them into silence. They knew. Their time in this world was over. Then Richard turned to the guests. Dozens of anxious eyes darted to his, desperate for mercy. He gave them none. "You watched my wife be humiliated. Some of you laughed. The rest of you stood by like cowards. But now you're afraid." He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Don't worry, I don't need leeches in my home." He flicked his wrist in a sharp, wordless command. That was all it took. Security moved in. The guests were removed like trespassers, stripped of the dignity of leaving on their own terms. No goodbyes, no final sips of wine, just the cold reality of their disgrace. Women adjusted their diamond necklaces with trembling fingers. Men squared their shoulders as if that could salvage their shattered pride. It couldn't. The sharp clatter of hurried heels against marble filled the air as they were escorted out. One by one, the doors slammed shut behind them. And then, silence. Richard and Sophia stood alone beneath the glimmering chandeliers. Finally, he turned to her, the steel in his gaze softening for the first time that night. "Are you okay?" His voice was nothing but tenderness now. Sophia laced her fingers through his, a quiet smile touching her lips. "I've never been better." As the last echoes of departing footsteps faded, Richard crossed the empty ballroom to an antique mahogany cabinet in the corner. Sophia watched as he opened it with reverent hands, revealing the vintage record player inside. "Our first date," he said softly, selecting a vinyl record and placing it on the turntable. The warm crackle of Ella Fitzgerald's "At Last" filled the air. Richard extended his hand, and Sophia stepped into his embrace. "The Palomar Ballroom, 1959, she whispered, leaning into him. "You wore your father's suit. And you wore that baby blue dress with white flowers on the hem," he replied, his voice a gentle rumble against her ear. "I couldn't dance to save my life." "You've improved considerably," Sophia laughed, as he twirled her expertly across the empty floor. As Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade began to play, they swayed in comfortable silence, moonlight streaming through tall windows. "Remember that summer at the Starlight Drive-In?" she asked. "In your father's Cadillac with the broken air conditioning?" "And windows that wouldn't roll down," Richard chuckled. "You still let me kiss you during Roman Holiday." Later, champagne in hand, they sat barefoot at the edge of the stage, reminiscing about their cross-country road trip along Route 66, and the waitress in Albuquerque who gave them free pie. "Ruby," Sophia recalled, with turquoise rings on every finger. "You always remember the names," Richard said softly, "and you always remember the stories." 3 weeks after the gala incident, Sophia sat at her vanity, brushing her hair when Richard appeared in the doorway. a mysterious smile on his face. "I have something for you," he said, holding an elegant blue envelope. Sophia opened it curiously, her eyes widening as she read the contents. "Richard, is this real?" "Very real," he nodded. "A private evening at the Metropolitan Opera House, just for us. The performance you've always wanted to see." Tears welled in her eyes. "La Bohème? With a private orchestra? And the soprano you've admired since we were newlyweds," he added softly. "It was supposed to be a surprise for our anniversary, but after what happened at the gala..." He took her hands in his. "You deserve your perfect night, Sophia." The night of the opera, as Sophia stood breathless in a stunning red gown at the entrance of the empty, illuminated theater, she noticed a small envelope on her seat. Inside was a handwritten note from Vivian. "Sophia, I can never adequately apologize for my behavior. Your husband didn't need to destroy my reputation. Your dignity had already shown mine to be hollow. I'm learning from my mistakes. With sincere regret, Vivian." A second note from Elaine was tucked behind it. "The charity foundation you mentioned that night. I've made a substantial donation, not for forgiveness, but because it was the right thing to do." They had bitterly regretted their actions and learned a hard lesson. From that day on, their lives changed forever. The same went for the guests. They never judged anyone again. Later, as the final notes of Che Gelida Manina echoed through the hall, Richard gently wiped a tear from Sophia's cheek. "Was it everything you dreamed?" he whispered. Sophia looked around the magnificent theater, then back to the man who had stood beside her through decades of joy and hardship. "It's more, so much more." As they walked out under the stars, hand in hand, Sophia smiled at a realization that felt both new and eternal. "Sometimes," she said, "the most powerful statement isn't making others small, but allowing yourself to stand tall." Before you go, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you love stories of justice, redemption, and life-changing twists, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Every story here is crafted to touch your heart, keep you on the edge of your seat, and remind you that kindness and strength always prevail in the end. Now, I have a question for you. Where in the world are you watching from? I love knowing where our incredible community is tuning in from. So drop a comment below and tell me the name of your city or country. It's amazing to see how far these stories reach. And I read every single comment. And here's something to think about. Have you ever witnessed someone being judged unfairly? Maybe you've even experienced it yourself. How did it make you feel? What would you have done differently if you could turn back time? Let's talk about it in the comments, because the more we share, the more we grow together. Finally, if this story moved you, give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend who loves powerful stories as much as you do. Remember, true strength isn't in wealth or power. It's in the way we treat others. See you in the next story.